Alexander the Great. Over 2 millennia ago, this man conquered much of the Middle East, establishing the largest empire in the world at the time before dying of what some say was a fever at the young age of 32. He had a short but eventful life, so here's Alexander the Great's life, summed up in less than 6 minutes. Alexander the Great was born around July 20th, 356 BCE. Exact dates are unknown. He was born in Pella, which was the capital of the ancient kingdom of Macedonia. His father, King Philip II, was the king of ancient Macedonia. His mother, Olympias, was the daughter of the king of Epirus and was one of King Philip's wives. As a child, there's not too much information about Alexander, because remember, this is almost 2.5 millennia ago. Written records aren't that big of a priority. When he was 12 or 13, again, exact dates are unknown, he tamed the wild horse Bucephalus. This would be his personal horse for many, many years to come. According to Plutarch, after seeing this, Alexander's father Philip II said, quote, "My boy, you must find a kingdom big enough for your ambitions. Macedon is too small." Macedon was just another name for Macedonia. From the ages of 13 to 16, Alexander was taught by the famous philosopher Aristotle. When he was 16, his father Philip went to fight a war in 340 BCE, and while he was gone, Alexander acted as the regent, or basically like the acting king. Over the next few years, Alexander and his father fought many battles, with Alexander never losing a battle. In fact, he would never lose a single battle in his entire life. In 338 BCE, he returned to Macedonia with his father, but his father married another woman, who, if she had a child, could challenge Alexander's right to the throne. At Philip's new wedding, Alexander, after some drunk shenanigans by his brand new uncle-in-law, stormed away, took his mother with him, and went into exile. In 336 BCE, however, King Philip was assassinated by one of his bodyguards, and Alexander became the new king of Macedonia at the young age of 19. Immediately after becoming king, he strengthened his grip on power and then suppressed some rebellions to show that he was a king who meant business. Now comes his pièce de résistance. See, his father had his eyes on the Persian Empire, but died before he could do anything about it. Alexander had no such issues and invaded Persia, or modern-day Iran. In 334 BCE, he crossed the Dardanelles, or as it was known back then, the Hellespont, with a massive army of almost 100,000 men. Remember, back then the population of the world was less than 150 million. If you projected that ratio of 100,000 to 150 million onto the global population today, then you would have an invading force of almost 5 million people, which is larger than the entire active military forces of Russia, China, and the United States, combined. In this first stage of his invasion, he invaded Asia Minor, or Western Turkey. There were 3 major battles: the Battle of the Granicus, the Siege of Halicarnassus, and the Siege of Miletus. Long story short, Alexander won all 3, and it was during this stage of the invasion that he cut the Gordian knot with his sword. The Gordian knot was a supposedly unknotable knot, who, if someone could unknot it, they were said to be the future king of Asia. Alexander would in part fulfill this. He'd take over much of Western Asia. In 332 BCE, he took over Egypt, and the next year he invaded and occupied much of the Middle East. After this, there was only the heart of Persia left for him to conquer. It was in Egypt that he founded the city Alexandria, named after, surprise surprise, himself. He named countless cities after himself, but Alexander was perhaps the most prominent one. After taking Babylon in the Middle East, he went and invaded the heart of Persia at the beginning of 330 BCE. After the Battle of the Persian Gate, where Persian forces were defeated, there was nothing to stop Alexander from taking the Persian capital, Persepolis. Alexander and his forces sacked Persepolis, and then he traveled the rest of Persia, conquering it and uniting it under Macedonian rule. After Persia, Alexander set his sights on India. In 327 BCE, he set out from Bactria with an alleged force of 120,000 people, though the actual percentage of people who could fight was probably a lot smaller, and got all the way to the Indus River, which he then crossed. Once he crossed the Indus River, his last major battle occurred, the Battle of the Hydaspes in 326 BCE. This battle, according to Encyclopaedia Britannica, was, quote, the closest Alexander the Great came to defeat. He eventually defeated the Indian King Porus, but Alexander was impressed by Porus's courage and let him keep his kingdom, but made him pay tribute to the Macedonians. Side note, it was about now that Bucephalus, Alexander's horse, died. After this, Alexander's soldiers, weary and tired, revolted and wanted to go back home to Macedonia. Remember, at this point, they'd been away from home for 8 years. Alexander returned to Persia, where, upon finding out that some of the people whom he placed in charge misbehaved, bribery, corruption, etc., he killed them. He made plans to invade the Arabian Peninsula, but before he could do so, on about June 13th, 323 BCE, he died. Again, exact dates are unknown. How'd he die? Some people say from eating and drinking too much, and others say from a fever. Another story is that he was poisoned, since ancient Macedonia had quite a bit of political assassinations going on. His tomb became an important place in the ancient world, with Julius Caesar, Augustus, and Pompey all visiting it, but today nobody knows where it is. After his death, the Macedonian Empire descended into chaos, and soon, it split into 4 separate kingdoms: the Kingdom of Pergamon in modern-day Turkey, the Antigone dynasty in Macedonia, Ptolemaic Egypt, and finally the Seleucid Empire in about the modern-day Middle East. So, that's Alexander the Great's life in less than 6 minutes. If you liked the video, then be sure to subscribe and like. Thank you for watching Explained. New videos every other Friday.